Well, as my most recent book makes clear, I think this issue of the biblical narrative is really, really huge for a number of reasons. First, because many people don't really have much of a biblical narrative. They just have little morals and Bible stories that are all discrete, and they haven't figured out any large sense of the arc of history. But also it's important because I think in many other cases we do have a kind of unspoken or tacit narrative that I actually think is against the gospel and against Jesus, but we think it's for. And so I think we have a huge amount of work to do in this. But we have a big problem. You can't communicate the biblical narrative in a single sermon. So the first thing I think we need to do is we need to create venues, learning opportunities, where people can be exposed to some thinking about the big arc of the Bible, and they can engage with that in a deep way, and then that understanding becomes the background against which they hear every sermon. And I think that can happen through reading books. I think it can happen through retreats. I think it happens through special classes. It maybe could happen through a series of sermons where we try to give people some big sense of the overarching narrative or narratives of the Bible. But it won't happen by accident. But once we've laid that groundwork, then I think in individual sermons, we can locate the specific sermon or story in relation to the backdrop. So for example, instead of saying, in Ephesians 2, we say, in the early church, when this message of Jesus about the kingdom of God was embracing Jewish people and Gentile people in an unprecedented way, Paul wrote a letter to a congregation in Gentile territory, and here's what he said. So suddenly now we're just not quoting a chapter and verse, but we're actually describing a specific text that we're about to preach on in relation to the larger story or narrative.